happen, then the next generations will blame us for squandering away the money. So while it is important that the money must come in large quantities and from whichever source, it is also important that we use every paisa well. We crib about hostels and hostel room being occupied by 2 students or 3 students. There are students who do not have a roof on their heads and they are studying in this country. So what are we talking about? I think we need to tighten up our belts. Do we live up to our responsibility? This is my question to the teachers, this is my question to the students. Do we live up to the responsibility of doing as best as we can? The purpose of education is not to create toppers. The purpose of education, particularly higher technical education, is to bring the best in every individual in terms of the problem-solving capability, in terms of the innovative creativity, and let that student go out in the real world applying these things. We teachers are certainly to blame for not doing this job well. Do you not take the blame for not doing your job well is the question that I would like to ask. How much do you work? It is well known that without hard work there is no substitute. As I said, at this age I don't get to sleep for more than 3 hours a day. How many hours do you sleep? Have you tried to consciously cut down that sleep by half an hour on an average? Whatever it is, individual characteristics would differ. Have you tried to work out on that extra half an hour a day that you gain on something innovative, something different? Or are you comfortable, getting these marks and getting good jobs? How many of you are passionate about chemical engineering or mechanical engineering if you are studying that, or electronics? And how many of you have already decided to apply for the so-called IT jobs so that you get good salaries to begin with? Not really caring whether that is the right direction of your career for the long term. I think these are hard questions. And these questions absolutely do not depend upon funding. Whether funding is zero or funding at maximum, these questions have to be asked by us and answered by us. I have the same questions to raise to my academic fraternity, my teacher colleagues. Since there are not many here, I would raise them separately. Professor Bhat, would you like to offer some concluding remarks? If there are any more questions, of course, I would take them, but we should, I think, wind up in next maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I would be very glad to answer questions. Yes.
Sir, my question is rather more relevant to what Professor Gupta spoke about. What I want to ask is social relevance really a criteria in judging fund allocations? Because some of the research that is going on may not really be, the use of that research may not be readily apparent in today's context. I mean, some of the latest technologies may not be useful as of today. But if you make social relevance a criteria, funds for these projects would get cut off and so research in such fields would really get hampered. So is it wise to, is it prudent to do that?
Relevance are considered as important projects by all nooks and corners of the government. The Digital Gateway Foundation project and the Media Lab Asia project that I am familiar with in IIT, which my colleague Professor Kriti Ramamritam runs, particularly stresses the fact that cutting-edge technology is desperately needed to be applied to problems of families which earn less than $1 a day. It is a myth that cutting-edge technology is required only in advanced countries and advanced industries. It is not true. The problem of village water porting, which Professor Gupta mentioned, needs to be solved. Let me give you an interesting example of what our faculty members and some students did in IIT. They actually constructed a dam, a water dam, so that 12 months water supply could be ensured to a village which used to get water. Being on the Western Ghats, you would realize the water would be there during monsoons and there will be no water later on. So they constructed a dam. A professor of computer science took the lead. Some students from our institution, a professor from civil engineering, a professor from architecture, self-help groups from that village, donors from amongst IIT-Bombay alumni. There's not a single paisa of government money was used. That dam was conceived, designed, constructed, made operational by these groups. I'm actually making a small film made. We are now starting to release such useful material in open source under Creative Commons license. Okay. So if you have a mechanism where you can load such contents on your server and make it accessible to students, you can do that. Such projects are being undertaken, but they are not being undertaken in the same numbers that are required. And let me also share with you the reason for it. First of all, how are projects defined? The BTech projects, the MTech projects and PhD projects are typically listed by faculty members who are pursuing their research interests. Their research interests get defined on the basis of the field in which they work, which they have picked up on the basis of the research interests of their guides, or what they perceive as important. If I am a teacher, what I perceive as important is in which field should I work so that I get visible research results which should be counted for my promotion. For my promotion, the only thing that counts is papers in the international journals of conferences. There is a specific clause in the higher academic institutions of the country which say number of papers published in national conferences, number of papers published in international conferences. As if publishing in national conferences is criminal. Now this nonsense has to stop. There have been a few people in my generation like me who did this. You know, we said we don't care, don't promote us for 20 years. Can every faculty member take that attitude? Would his wife or husband permit him or her to take that attitude? They'll say, nonsense, you've got to get promotion. You don't get promotion doing this. Let me recite what a dean of MIT once told me when MIT was set up. Please remember, in those days when MIT was set up in late 1800s, American education system at the higher education was not well known. The European universities, Oxford, Cambridge, so many things on the European land, they were the important institutions. The MIT set up its target on two simple criteria. Number one, they said, whatever we do shall be the best in the world. And number two, they said, our priority will be to solve local problems. They were doing research on improving the effectiveness of agricultural implements used by Boston farmers. Not a single paper could ever be published in Oxford or Paris or wherever, because it did not matter. They didn't care. They didn't care. Do we give that facility to our teachers and our researchers? There are people who don't care, like this fellow who built a dam, like the Affordable Solutions Lab where people do research on cutting-edge technology. But systemically, I think we need to say that we care. Japanese researchers first publish their best work in Japanese journals. Only if Japanese journals don't accept those papers, they send those to IEEE or ACM. How many of you would aspire to write papers which you will first submit to Computer Society of India? We do not have that pride. We still unfortunately believe, long after Lord Macaulay is gone and long after the whole world has changed, the world does not work on Macaulay principles today. The world today works on collaboration, cooperation, working together. The world understands that the whole humanity is coming together. But we still have not got rid of the mentality that something that is foreign is good. It is you to have that confidence. If you have that confidence, the world will not come in the way. This confidence needs to be created. This is one point about why teachers would tend to list projects which are of relevance to their career, because that is natural. But what about you? How many of you are willing to select projects after application of mind? How many of you, when you select your final year projects, select it as a matter of course, not because you see that as an extraordinary chance to do something great? Because most of you have either been selected by companies or are going to be selected by companies, and you are not particularly perturbed by the fact that the project is an extraordinary opportunity because you don't intend to take that as an opportunity to do something creative. Isn't that a fact? If that is a fact, then why crib about higher education system? Remember, system is not something different. You and I constitute that system. And you are in majority in any system. If you decide to be vociferously demanding, if you decide to demand